Oh my gosh, we're just 2 days away from our amazing Cinderella Monologues book launch. It's happening very soon on October 22nd, 2022. Have you joined our Facebook group? Please join right away. That is where you can keep up to date with all of our amazing, courageous women authors, get to know them, get to hear about them, and then also join our celebration for this amazing book launch. We need your support to help us rise to the top of the Amazon top selling categories, and just be in this moment of a unique feminine rising of all these women's voices uniting together. It truly is a magical, spectacular time. You're invited to the ball. In keeping with the Cinderella theme, this is going to be our glittering moment. We're all going to show up on Saturday in our very finest. So proud to deliver the Cinderella monologues and to share with all of you and your friends and family and associates all over. So please join our Facebook group. It's on the screen right here. It's the Cinderella Monologues Meet the Authors. And we welcome you. Oh my gosh, I can hardly contain myself. It just feels like Christmas is around the corner just because we're so close to our launch and we're driving lots of momentum for it. And one of the privileges that I get to do is to sit down with each and every single author to hear their experience, what writing meant for them, and to hear their take on many different Cinderella themes. So one of the themes that we'll be exploring today is really talking about forgiveness, right? And forgiveness in all the capital letters. And is that possible? When you think about Cinderella and what she had to endure with the mistreatment of, her stepmother and her stepsisters, etc. And one of our other authors had touched upon this before with the mistreatment, right? LaDonna Maccabee, she talked about that. And so coming around to this topic again, what does it take to forgive and forgive with all capital letters? How do you even go about doing that? Is it possible? So we're going to be sitting down with Corinne Lalanne. She is another fabulous author of the Cinderella Monologues. And she's going to be sharing her unique story and, what she had to go through with her own father and with many different circumstances in her life. Just a little bit of information about Corinne. She is a life coach, a grief facilitator, a holistic health practitioner, specializing in individual group recovery sessions, soul healing, and maintains a private practice in Auburn, California. Prior to that, she was an accountant. So we'll hear a little bit about how she fell into this journey of healing. What I admire so much about Corinne is that she's really super interactive. She takes a solution-focused approach to the healing that she performs on her clients and really incorporating so many different modalities. Like, she's so knowledgeable and has a certification from the California Institute for the Healing Arts and Sciences. So I'm excited to talk to her today about, what writing her chapter meant for her and, to hear more about this concept of forgiveness. So please, everyone, welcome Corinne Lalanne. Hello, Corinne.
Hi, Olivia. So nice to be here with you.
Indeed. I'm so excited to sit down with you. And you are looking just so magnificent in purple. Like, I just can't help but gravitate to this color. It really suits our topic today about healing. I feel like you're bringing lots of healing energy with that particular color.
Thank you. It's probably one of my favorites. So it's a guiding light in my world.
Guiding light. And I love your office. You've got the joy star. You've got the singing bowl.
We awesome. Do it all. We do it all here.
You do indeed. Indeed. So tell me, because I know a little bit about your story about coming from an accountant background. How did you fall into this, healing practice? I find that so unusual, like, an accountant on one hand, holistic health on the other. How did you combine those two, or are they two different tracks?
Probably two different tracks. I started out, my father was in the military, so he was very regimented. And so, I needed to find something that was going to sort of fill the accountability part of me. And I'm a numbers person. And so, that sort of ended up how I fell into being working for several CPAs and enrolled agents and so forth. And it was great. But the one thing I did know is that I did not want to become a CPA, and I didn't want to sign my life away for 60 to 80 hours the first 4 months of the year. and I wanted to raise a family and do all those kind of, fun things and spend more time with them. And so uh, early on, there was a lot of grief and loss in my family, and I ended up kind of going down those pathways of whether it was healing myself or healing members of the family, walking that journey. It was sort of a natural gravitation that sort of went toward grief and loss and healing. I don't want to say I'm incredibly well experienced at loss, but unfortunately I am. And that was sort of the dynamic of that. So doing a lot of self-help books and sort of feeling out what it is to walk the journey of grief. Being the person that I am, and having spent the last 15 years doing divorce recovery, I know one of the things I would always tell my students was, you know what, this is a journey that everyone is individual, and you can't go around it, you can't go over it, and you can't go under it. You have to walk through it. And I always promised them that, with the 13-week sessions that I did with my group classes, said you'll never have to walk it alone. And that was the key. That was the very special key. And then we covered several topics that really spoke to who they were as a person, and how they could come away from a traumatic relationship issue with family situations and so forth, and find healing and be able to move on in their lives. So that was sort of the first part of my journey. And as life went on and the traumas were different, I have ended up feeling into the energy part, got into the spirituality part, and doing a lot of meditation. And God and Spirit just sort of led me toward, what about healing? What about healing? And I never thought of myself as a healer. The story that I wrote here obviously was certainly opening that door to validation for me.
Wow, that is incredible. And like you said, like you had to go through it yourself, right? And come out on the other side in order to be able to now guide others. Like,
Yeah, it's definitely, it's not a journey that, most people, I mean, a lot of people will say, oh, I can do this on my own. I can, I can do this. But the reality is, I think you get much more mileage by having some sort of a support system. When I would do my grief facilitation, for instance, or not my grief facilitation, when I do my divorce facilitation, I had a couple of people say to me, Corinne, I spent 3.5 years in talk therapy and counseling, and what you've done in 13 weeks has done more for me than what I did in 3 years. So that was quite an attribute. I thought I was on the right road.
excellent. I remember you had talked about, having some challenges growing with your dad who might have been abusive, but then later on, as he was getting older, you took him in and cared for him at the last 8 years or so of his life. I mean, what was that like to have that dynamic with him again?
If I hadn't been doing the work that I was doing, whether it was divorce recovery, grief facilitation, if I hadn't really been doing the work for those certain elements, I never would have been able to bring him to my home. When I realized that I was his only child, the only family that really he had left, and really it was going to fall on me, I had to sort of put on my big girl pants and decide, is this something that I'm going to just sort of pass off to the military and hope that they'll take care of him, or am I going to bring him in? And in order to do that, I had to do some real soul searching, some real healing on myself, to be able to look at this man with a loving nature after all that had been through. And so I really did. I coined that I had to learn how to forgive with capital letters.
Indeed. And so it came from healing yourself first and doing the work.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. And your chapter title for the Cinderella monologues is A Cycle Broken. So, how does your father's story tie into this chapter title?
Well, as a child growing up in all the issues that I had to deal with, and him being in the military, I so hated the military because it was an easy way to blame whose fault it was. So we traveled, we did a lot of moves because of the military. I didn't grow up with a lot of childhood friends that I, sort of still have now. It was very transient, and again, being an only child, I didn't know any different. So in my growing up, I just had to, what was going to work best for me, what was going to work for me. And now I even forgot what your question was.
Well, the story forgiveness and the cycle broken. How do they go
Oh,
together?
breaking the cycle. In all of my studies and so forth, there are statistics that talk about, coming from, abusive childhoods or alcoholic families and adults and so forth, that the statistics are pretty high that you're going to recreate that cycle. And I promised myself early on in my life that wasn't going to be me. I wasn't going to raise a child to live the life I had lived. And I was very blessed that I must have gotten that message, because going through what I went through and finding the man that I married and that fathered my children, top priority was being a father, being a father that I never had. And my two girls, they're both adults now. One's 38 and one's 35 or 34, and they have children of their own. And I honestly realized that I had accomplished, the cycle was broken. Did not grow up in a house where there was alcohol abuse, where there was violence. They grew up in a very loving family environment, two parents who were so incredibly active in their schooling and their upbringing and their extracurricular activities. And that was, I guess, I got to give them the childhood that I always wanted. And that's how I broke the cycle.
Oh, that's so beautifully said that you gave your daughters and grandchildren the
Yep.
childhood that you never got. Um, how does that relate to Cinderella, right? So when you
Well,
see the Cinderella story, how do you identify with her and her childhood?
well, to be perfectly honest with you, Olivia, like every kid, we all love Disneyland, and we all love, um, Walt Disney and Disney World and so forth. But I spent a lot of years saying, you know what, I think we were duped by Walt Disney, because there's no such thing as the happiest place on earth. There's no, I really did. I thought that it was just in storybooks. So, when Cinderella has her story to sort of tell, and just being the person that she was, and just her integrity, her honesty, it allowed her, and allowed the world to see her true nature. Um, I think that was a bigger gift, um, at least finding out that later on in life.
Oh, indeed. Wonderful. And I think you said something to me too about how, Cinderella never was always doing chores and the chores are never ending. So she never got to go out and play.
My father, when he was home, and even my mom was pretty regimented too. Every Friday nights we spent cleaning the house. And my father was a drill instructor, so when he would walk in and make himself present, he would always, touch, and he was 6'7", so he would touch the light bulbs, and he would touch the top of the windows, and he'd give it this thing, and it's like, nope, it's not clean, it's not done. So yeah, you can go out and play, Corinne, as soon as your chores are done. But guess what? Your chores are never going to be done. And that was the sad part of Cinderella's life.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And in the work that you do with your clients, I think you've come up with this term with the biology of trauma. Can you expand on that more, on your take on that?
Yeah, I think that in recent years, I've done a lot of walking people through the different modalities of healing, kind of coming to grips with, the events that have happened in their life. And a lot of things are starting to focus, and I'm being guided down to a place. And I think in today's society, we're really living this out now, where we're realizing the repercussions of the way we were brought up, or if there were traumatic events that happened in our life, we our body hangs on to that. And Louise Hay is an amazing author, absolutely amazing author, one of my favorite mentors. And the body doesn't lie. I used to go into my divorce classes, and I would hear a few people go, "Oh my gosh, my lower back is really killing me," and I said, "Well, it certainly makes sense. You're probably having some real difficulty with your finances right now." And they just look at me like I read them, and I said, "No," I said, "Louise Hay puts a book out. You can heal your life, and the things that your body will tell you if you listen." And I've become, over the years, I've tried to become very attuned to what my own body says, and how it responds to the traumas and the issues that I've had to deal with. And I think I've been very fortunate. I know that when you don't have your health, you don't have anything. I mean, you don't want to get up in the morning. You don't want to get through the day. So if I can help in some way to relieve, or to at least acknowledge that presence, then what a gift. What a gift.
So how do we begin that process, Corinne, of listening to our body? What does that look like if someone's
I
new?
I think the hardest thing in the groups that I've sort of sessioned with, the hardest thing is, like you say, listening to our body. And of course, meditation. We used to think that meditation was kind of woo woo, and people didn't hear too much about that. And I'm so intrigued now, because I'm hearing it more and more and more, and even from a lot of Western culture doctors. I have a daughter who went into the medical field, and she's an RN. And so she was raised with me sort of in an Eastern culture, and she's very attuned to that, but she was also educated in the Western world. And so I can see where she fights with that. But she's starting to see with her own children, and whether they have medical issues or whatever, that the doctors are starting to talk to her about things like meditation, and dance and movement, and allowing them to sort of get their feelings out. And it's like, this is coming from a doctor's office? Are you kidding me? Or diets, changing diets. If you've got allergies. I mean, I grew up as an asthmatic child. Louise Hay also talks about that. Being the child of an adult or an alcoholic, the symptoms, or the root cause of an asthmatic child is that you don't want to be there. You don't want to be in this world, which every child who's grown up with an alcoholic parent knows exactly what I'm talking about. So it's those kind of things. We've just become, we're hearing so much more about it in today's world, with all the mental health issues that are happening. If we could teach our kids how to meditate and how to hear and feel what's going on in our bodies. My father was in his 80s. He couldn't feel what was in his body. He had no clue what was in it. I could read his body better than he could. And I can see it happening with friends who have adult aging parents that are doing the exact same things. It's like, I don't understand what's wrong with him, or and I said, you know what? He's on edge because something isn't right. And when you finally, my dad's thing was that he had urinary tract infections. So whenever he would start to not feel well or have issues, then he would start to develop a bad temper or be angry or whatever. And in doing so, it usually ended up becoming a health issue that was needed to be addressed. The doctors didn't even know he had a urinary tract infection until I took him to the doctor and said, he needs to be tested. It's those kind of things.
This is such a fascinating discussion, Corinne. Thank you, thank you. And I'm curious too about how you had said something too. Like, I mean, you're so knowledgeable about all these different modalities only because you've experienced them, you've practiced them. You're obviously a practitioner of many different things, of techniques. And so I think you mentioned something about how you can even do it without the other person knowing. So can you share with us?
I think that's probably the intuitive side. I've spent a lot of time sort of just rediscovering who I am. And I find myself, I'm definitely an empath. So when I can feel what other people can't, and it's so profoundly interesting to me to be able to sit with, a senior citizen or someone who, having done it with my dad, I just did it by second nature. But I realized, oh, everybody can't do that. Wow, maybe this is one of my gifts. And, that sort of goes back to, how did I start down this path? Well, with all these little affirmations and these little words of encouragement and peace of, it's like, wow, that makes perfect sense. When I can take my father in and tell the doctor, I think he really needs to have, be checked for a UTI or whatever. And they just look at me like, well, he has no signs of it. I said, no, he does. He does. And that's when I realized, I obviously, my intuition is probably better than I thought it was. And I too am now trying to sort of move to that frequency of listening to my intuition.
Oh, that's such a cool phrase. I love how you said that. Moving to the frequency of your intuition. I gotta write that down for everyone. Okay, so moving into the frequency of your intuition. Oh, well said, Corinne. Awesome, awesome. And I really sense that from you, right? And just your whole total energy embodiment. Like I can sense that.
Oh, thank you. That's quite a compliment.
You're welcome. You're so welcome. And I'm curious, about your daughters and how they're raising their kids. What is the change they see in you, or, yeah, because it was a promise. I mean, we talked about the promises you keep to yourself the other day with another author, Kimchi Chow, and it was so amazing, because it's that commitment, that driving force. If you declaring something that you're going to follow through with it. So you made that promise. I'm going to give them the best childhood that I never received. Mm-hmm. Do your daughters understand how powerful that was and what it's meant?
I don't know if they actually do understand it. I know that if we had a dialogue, much like you and I are talking, I think all of a sudden the light bulb would go off and they'd understand this, or they'd maybe connect a dot or two. Every once in a while, I'll get a little affirmation that sort of, oh, there goes mom again. And then, or oh gosh, my two daughters, I heard a conversation, how did mom do those things? How did she know those things? And I think now that they're beginning to sort of, be moms of their own and raise their children, and they're, my grandchildren are basically 11, 8, down to 3, and I have 5. And so consequently, I think they're just now starting to see glimmers of what that must have been like, or maybe how difficult it was, and how maybe mom kind of made that look so easy. And so every once in a while, not very often, I'll get a glimmer of an affirmation. And I believe in my heart, my intuition tells me that my girls and I are probably going to have a sort of a wisdom session as they get older, and things tend to happen in their families, with the kids and so forth. There's some health issues that are cropping up in a couple of circumstances with one of my daughters, and all of a sudden I think she's becoming a little more appreciative of what it's like to live in this fast-paced world, but still take a moment to listen to your body, to still take a moment to slow down enough to meditate, to have the courage, and I mean courage, to go inside. I don't think they thought that before, but I do think they do. They're working their way toward that.
That is so beautiful, Corinne, that you'd have this relationship with your daughter and forming a wisdom circle later on. I think that's amazing. I mean, that's a whole new cycle, right? It's a whole new generational cycle that you are creating that may be
Hopefully.
passed on.
Hopefully. And it doesn't go without, it doesn't go without trials and tribulations. I mean, I think to myself, I don't have a perfect relationship with either one of my daughters. Um, but, but there are those glimmers, and I think at some point the relationship will become richer. I really do believe that. They're too busy raising kids right now.
Indeed, indeed. So, in summary, in writing this chapter, being part of this writing community for the Cinderella Monologues, what did it feel like when you pushed that button to submit the chapter?
I think I may have mentioned this before, but um, I was asked to be a speaker in my youngest daughter's psychology class, and they wanted a victim, and they didn't know how to ask for a victim who had been a victim of child abuse. And so my daughter had asked me if I would come and speak, and I said, "Wow, I'm going to have to think about that." And I took some time, thought about it, and I said I would commit to doing it, but the only way I would do it is if I could change the outcome. And I don't want this person to be a victim. I want it to have a happy ending. And so in doing that, I sort of started the writing of this cycle broken. And I got to a place where I really thought I was healed with my dad's situation and all of that. And it really wasn't. That was only the second chapter. The third chapter was when I had the courage, and I say courage now because it was courage to bring him to my home, and to let him live out the last 8 years of his life. I didn't think he would live that long. I thought that I might be able to put him into a military housing or facility or something, and that didn't happen. So the reality is that I still had another chapter to go, and I didn't realize that until I wrote this cycle broken, and I wrote the story to the end of his life. And so when I finally did hit the send button on that, I realized that that was the completion. The completion wasn't 10 years before or 5 years before. It was at that moment that I really had forgiven him. I really had, and I knew that I was probably the best daughter that he could have had. And certainly it was, at that point, it became an honor to have been the person to transition him from this world to the next.
That is truly forgiveness with all capital letters.
I think so.
Amazing, Corinne. Awesome. Well, we hope that you've enjoyed listening to a little bit about Corinne's chapter and just her unique pathway into the spiritual healing journey that she's on. You can read her chapter and the rest of it in the Cinderella Monologues. So please make sure you grab your copy, soon to be released on Amazon, October 22nd, 2022. And of course, please join our Facebook group where we can follow up with all the authors. And of course, please visit Corinne's website, www.balancehealthandlife.com. I mean, she is just an amazing coach, life coach, intuitive coach, grief facilitator, so many things, specializing in separation, loss, and grief. So highly recommend Corinne to you. Oh, Corinne, thank you so much for just being so open and honest and talking about the family relationships that you are coming through and the work that you do.
Thank you. Thank you so much for letting me be vulnerable.
Absolutely. Oh, so thrilled that you are in our Cinderella Monologues compilation book. And I just feel like a really strong bond and connection amongst all the women.
Mm. It's special. It's very special.
Indeed, it is. Indeed. All right, Corinne. Well, thank you so much for your time with us this today, and we're gonna see you at the launch. And stay tuned, everyone, because there's more author spotlights to come. I've got 22 authors I got to cover, and so this is only our second week, so there's more to come. We'd love for your support. We'd love for you to come and get to know all these women's stories coming together. Have a great day. Talk to you again tomorrow.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye bye.
You make it easy, Olivia.
My pleasure. Take care, everyone.